All right, we have a witness to be called. This is Ms. Lynne Blake, and there may be some portions of this testimony that could depend, in order for their proper admission, they may depend upon the establishment of a conspiracy before they would be admitted. So we need to proffer whatever portions of testimony, Mr. Davis, that you anticipate may involve that.
Well, I'll call Ms. Blake. One of my concerns is if I have to proffer everything that will come later, it's cumbersome to do that. I can tell the court now, we've got a witness by the name of Heather McGee who will come here and testify that Karen Tobie told her that she hired someone to kill her husband. You know, so, and I had intended on bringing her down from New Jersey, you know, for profit. So, you know, that's going to come. I can go through with Ms. Blake, although, you know, I don't anticipate too much from her deposition to change Ms. Blake, but I can go through and hit that. A lot of the evidence of the conspiracy is through Ms. Blake's own, her testimony about what she heard herself. So I can cover that, because that established a conspiracy in and of itself.
Okay. Yeah, if you do that, and of course, keep in mind, I'm not privy to that part of the discovery.
Yes, sir.
So I don't know what it is you're particularly talking about.
That's and I'll do this, but that's the whole reason of the hearing. I said, okay, I set forth, here's what I anticipate defense. If that doesn't sound right from what we've had up.
Right, that was our James hearing.
Right, but I'm prepared if we'd like to cover those areas.
Let's cover that, and that will be out of an abundance of caution for this part of it.
I believe the needs to be brought up. Yes, I believe so.
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I
do. We request the cuffs be taken off. We see no need of that, even though the jury's not here. Certainly tomorrow, but
and that's. Pardon? Is that?
I don't see cuffs on the defendants here in court, Your Honor.
All right, the cuffs are being removed.
And just while we're at it, Your Honor, I would request tomorrow, there's not going to be any hiding the fact that Ms. Blake's in jail, but we request no restraints beyond her when she testifies at all. From when she comes out here, we'd certainly like to avoid having something like that in front of the jury, or removing cuffs if we may.
I think that's reasonable.
Yes, so typically, they can, and I don't want to tell them to do their job, but in the past, we typically do that right inside that door, and she can be brought out.
Okay, I think that's reasonable.
Will you tell us your full name, please?
Lynne Blake.
Ms. Blake, what's your date of birth?
6/12/48.
And you're currently in the Volusia County Jail?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Blake, I'm just to let you know, this is what's called a proffer. I'm going to go through portions of your testimony. This is not your testimony, obviously, before the jury. I'm going to go through certain portions of your testimony. All right?
Yes, sir.
I don't intend to go through everything, and I'm going to skip, and just to let Your Honor know in defense, background and things like that. I'm going to get right to the issues at hand. And just to make, were you living back in the time frame of the first half of the year 2004? Were you living at 319 Center Street in Duplex B?
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Cataneo and Karen Tobie and their child Lewis was living in 319 Center Avenue, Duplex A?
Yes, sir.
In Holly Hill?
Yes, sir.
Did there come a time in the February timeframe, around February of 2004, when you had discussions with Ms. Tobie about her obtaining a gun?
Yes, sir.
Did Ms. Tobie make statements to you about wanting to get a gun?
Yes.
What did she tell you that? Why did she tell you she wanted to get a gun?
To kill her husband.
What actions, if any, did you and her take in order to try to find a gun for her to kill her husband?
I drove her to several locations, and she went in and asked people.
And what locations were those?
One was to a local bar called Rousey's, and the other was to a carpet business. I'm not sure the name.
And did Ms. Tobie, and I'll make clear, you said it was going to make clear, did she tell you that she was wanting to get a gun in order to kill her husband?
Yes, sir.
Was that the purpose of you driving her locations in order for her to look for a gun in order to do that?
Yes, sir.
When she came out of those establishments, did she make statements to you about, well, I asked, and indicate to you that she had made the request to persons inside the bar?
Yes, sir.
Do you know a Mr. Tysjohaun Cooper?
Yes, sir.
Back during the time frame, again, between, I'm focusing on the March-April time frame, or certainly between February and June time frame, right? Did there come a time where you heard any conversation between Ms. Tobie and Mr. Cooper about her wanting him to get a gun for her?
Yes, sir.
And where did you overhear that conversation?
It was in the backyard behind my part of the duplex at 319 Center Avenue.
Where were you when you overheard this conversation?
In my part of the duplex, I was in the master bedroom.
And where was Ms. Tobie and Mr. Cooper?
They were on the deck area directly behind my part of the duplex.
Now, is this a time when there was some work being done in the yard, on the sod or something, some sodding, things like that being done around the house?
Yes, sir.
Were there other people I'm not talking about an area where the conversation took place, were there other people in the general area of the yard doing work and things?
Yes.
Was there anyone in the immediate vicinity where Mr. Cooper and Ms. Tobie were having the conversation?
No.
Were you in a position where you could overhear what was being said?
Yes.
And what did you hear being said between the two?
She had asked him basically if he could get her a gun.
And what was his response?
Yes, he could.
Did he ask why or anything to that effect?
Yes, he did.
And what was her response when he said why?
To kill my husband.
And then after that, did he say yes, he could?
Yes, sir.
Did you overhear further discussions after that time about the purchase of the gun in terms of the price and how much money and why there would be money needed, things like that? Did you overhear any conversations along those lines?
Yes, sir.
And who did you overhear those conversations between?
Between Karen and Tysjohaun.
Specifically, I'd like to focus on was there a conversation about the price for the price that would be paid for Ms. Tobie getting Mr. Cooper a gun?
Yes, sir.
Explain that conversation.
Tysjohaun had said that if he were to kill her husband or get her a gun to kill her husband, that he'd be out of a job. And so she said, well, what would it take? And he said, well, I would like to get a license, a CDL license to work with my father. And he said, he mentioned $1,800. Okay, and then she said, well, and he said, but that's not going to help me much because I don't have any money to pay for my rent. And she said, well, We figured out basically, how much it would run between $1,800 and for a couple months' rent so he could finish his schooling, and it basically came out to $3,000.
And did you hear that conversation?
Yes, sir.
And did Ms. Tobie say she would give him $3,000?
Yes, sir.
Now, where did this conversation take place?
This took place at the place of business on 8th Street.
The Cataneo Plumbing shop?
Yes, sir.
Did you drive the car there?
Yes, sir.
Was Ms. Tobie with you?
Yes, sir.
And did this conversation take place around the car there?
Yes, sir.
And after that conversation, did Ms. Tobie, to your knowledge, obtain money in order to pay for the gun?
Yes, sir.
And where did she go to get that money?
Bank of America.
And how do you know she went there?
I drove her there.
And did you have a conversation when she came out about how much money she obtained?
Yes, sir.
And how much money did she obtain from Bank of America?
She said that she couldn't get the whole $3,000. She had $2,000 on one credit card, and I'm not sure if at the time she said either $300 or $700 on another.
Soon after she got that money, do you recall going to the Volusia Mall and meeting Mr. Cooper there at the Volusia Mall?
Yes, sir.
Who drove to the Volusia Mall? In other words, did you drive there?
Yes, I did.
Who was in the car with you?
Karen and Lewis.
And when you got to the mall, at some point, did you meet with Mr. Cooper?
Yes, sir.
And how had he gotten to the mall from what you saw?
He drove his vehicle.
At some point, did he get out of his car?
Yes, sir.
What did he do when he got out of his car?
He drove, he parked, we were facing this way, he was facing this way. He got out, came around to the passenger side of our vehicle and Karen said, get into the back seat. So he got into the back seat.
Who else was in the back seat?
Lewis.
In a car seat?
Yes, sir.
When Mr. Cooper got in the back seat, did he give anything to either you or Ms. Tobie?
He handed Karen the gun.
And what did either you or Karen give to Mr. Cooper?
Karen told me to hand him the money, and I handed him a bank envelope with money in it.
So Mr. Cooper handed a gun to Ms. Tobie, and then you handed money to Mr. Cooper?
Yes, sir.
Was that the money that Ms. Tobie had gotten out within a few days of the bank transaction you talked about?
Yes, sir.
Did you hear a discussion about ammunition or anything about to that effect?
Yes, sir.
Inside the car?
Yes, sir.
Who said what?
Karen asked him if there was any ammunition. He said yes, it was fully loaded.
And after that transaction occurred, did Mr. Cooper get out of the car and get back in his car and drive away?
Yes, he did.
The next day, did Ms. Tobie did she test fire the gun?
Yes, sir.
Where did that happen?
I'm not exactly positive of the actual location. It was out on State Road 40.
Who drove her there?
I did.
Did you hear her fire the gun?
Yes, sir.
Did she say anything about the gun, its working condition?
Yes, she said it jammed up.
What particular part of the gun did she say there was a problem with?
I guess the clip.
All right. And what was done with the gun after leaving from test fire and going back? Assume you all went back to, eventually ended up back at the residence there at 319 Center Avenue?
Yes, sir.
And where'd the gun go?
It was in my possession.
And did you keep the gun
Yes, sir.
for a period of time?
Yes, sir.
Then what did you do with the gun?
I decided that I didn't want it in my possession.
Well, what'd you do with the gun?
I threw it out into the Halifax River.
Did you take the police there at a later date and show them the general area?
Yes, sir.
Is that around the Tomoka River Basin?
Yes, sir.
Who was with you when you went to throw the gun away?
Karen and Lewis.
Now, did Ms. Tobie make any statements to you before you threw the gun away about attempting to kill her husband and how she could do that with the clip not working? Did she joke about that or make some statements to you about
Yes,
that? What'd she say?
She said, I guess I'll have to tell him to hold on while I drop the clip and reinsert it. so that she could shoot him.
After getting rid of the gun, did Miss Tobie make any statements to you about what plans, if anything, she had to do with regard to killing her husband after getting rid of the gun?
Not at that point.
Well, was there any talk about killing her husband after that? If I understand you right, first she wants to get a gun to kill her husband,
Right.
and there's a gun purchase made. Was she still planning to kill her husband?
Yes, sir.
Well, what did she make any statements to you about what she would have to do in order to do that?
She was going to had to continue looking for another gun.
There was another gun found at all?
No.
Was there any talk to that about trying to find anybody to do it as opposed to getting a gun?
Yes, sir.
And tell me about that. What'd she say in that regard?
She said she was going to have to find somebody to do it because she said that she just couldn't do it.
Now, after she made that statement to you, were you present at the Cataneo plumbing shop, and did you witness a encounter between Mr. Cooper and Miss Tobie there?
Yes, sir.
And explain what you, first of all, where were you and where were they? And tell us what you heard and saw.
I was inside the office. The window blinds were open, and Karen and Tysjohaun were out in the parking lot, which is directly in front of the window. And she had explained to him that the gun didn't work. And we threw
Did
it
you
away.
hear her saying that? Or?
Yeah. Well, yes. At that point, I had.
And did you hear explain what you were able to hear or see with regard to their interaction?
Karen had said that she couldn't, since the gun didn't work, she's going to have to find somebody to kill John. And then Tysjohaun made some gesture across his chest saying that I'm your man.
Now, did you actually hear that, or did you just see him, his mouth?
I saw it. I saw it.
Did you actually hear the words?
It was vague. It wasn't quite clear. It wasn't like he was like right in front of me. But there was a glass between us. So.
But could you see him when he was talking? Did you see the "I'm your man"?
Yes, sir.
Did you see a gesture that he made across his chest?
Yes, sir.
And when Karen came back to you, what did she say?
She said my problems are over.
Did she say why that was, or what he said? What did he do?
She said that Tysjohaun was going to take care of it.
And what did you take that to mean? Take care of what?
That he would kill John.
Did you know when you were there at the shop? Did you know, based on your discussion with Tobie, that she was looking for someone to kill her husband? Based on what she told you, I mean, she had said, when the gun thing didn't work out, you said she made statements. Well, I'm going to have to get somebody else to do it. Did you know when she was talking to him and when you saw what was going on, that request was being made?
Yes, sir.
Now, and I'm sorry, I'm going to just pause there for a minute because I do want to back up. There's one thing I want to cover. After the time, this was back when Ms. Tobie was attempting to get a gun. After you heard the conversation where Mr. Cooper in the backyard area said that he would get a gun for her to kill her husband, from that time until the gun was actually purchased at the mall, were there occasions where you and Ms. Tobie actually would drive by the shop and try to find Mr. Cooper to ask him where the gun was, if he had got the gun yet?
Yes, sir.
Was this done on several occasions?
Numerous.
Did you always find Mr. Cooper when he went by the shop?
No.
At times, were there conversations with him about, has he gotten it yet, or something to that effect?
Yes.
And who would have those conversations with him?
Karen would.
And would she be sitting in the car while you're in the driver's seat usually?
Yes, sir.
So would you be able to hear her saying to him, have you gotten it yet? Something to that effect?
Yes, sir.
Referring to the gun?
Yes, sir.
And what was his response typically?
Basically, it was not yet.
Other times, did you drive by where he wouldn't even come to the car and talk?
Yes, sir.
What would he do?
Just like, not yet.
And you're putting your hands up, kind
Right.
of like,
Right.
don't
Just
know.
gesture, not yet.
Is that what you took that to mean?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I just want to cover that. So now we're to the point where you over the conversation, Ms. Tobie talked to you about Mr. Cooper saying he would kill Mr. Cataneo.
Yes, sir.
After that point, did you have, were you present when Ms. Tobie and Mr. Cooper were discussing the fact that it had to get done and when it had to get done and things to that effect?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to take one occasion. Was there a time at the shop when you were there and heard a conversation between Mr. Tobie and Mr. Cooper about the fact that this had to be done soon?
Yes, sir.
What was coming up that was a deadline in your mind and Ms. Tobie's mind?
They were supposed to go on for a family reunion, and it would have been over the July 4th weekend.
And had you discussed this with Ms. Tobie, the fact that he would need to be killed before that time, before the reunion?
Yes, sir.
And in the conversation at the shop, when did Ms. Tobie tell Mr. Cooper that it had to be done sooner versus later?
Yes, sir.
Did you actually join in at some point and make the comment something like, yeah, it's got to get done sooner versus later, something to that effect?
Yes, sir.
And when you were saying that, was it clear in your mind that discussion was about killing Mr. Cataneo?
Yes, sir.
Did you also hear another conversation, and again, this is after Mr. Cooper agreed to kill Mr. Cataneo. Did you overhear a conversation between Mr. Tobie and Mr. Cooper at the residence, at the Cataneo residence?
Yes, sir.
And where were you and Ms. Tobie when this conversation took place?
We were in my living room on my half of the duplex.
And was your window open?
Yes, sir.
Were you talking, did you overhear Ms. Tobie talking to Mr. Cooper through the window?
Yes, sir.
Was anybody else in that immediate vicinity that you saw could hear what was going on other than you three?
No.
Did Mr. Cooper say anything with regard to when he planned to carry this the killing out?
Yes, sir.
When did he say he was going to do
He said that he would do it over the July 4th holiday.
How did Ms. Tobie respond to that?
That it had to be before that because they were going to be leaving and they wouldn't be there for the 4th.
Did Mr. Cooper say why he wanted to do it over the 4th of July weekend?
Because the sound of all the fireworks and people, setting off fireworks in the area would have muffled the sound.
Now, at some point, to your knowledge, was a price agreed on between Ms. Tobie and Mr. Cooper for him killing Mr. Cataneo?
Yes, sir.
And what was the price?
$5,000.
And how do you know that?
I was there. I was present when they discussed it.
And who told what, the $5,000? And how did Ms. Tobie say she would pay that to him?
Yes, sir.
Where did she say she would receive that money?
After she would get the money from the insurance.
Did she tell him she'd pay him $5,000 from the insurance money?
Yes, sir.
Did you hear that conversation?
Yes, sir.
And where was that conversation?
That was at the shop.
Did you have conversations with Ms. Tobie at some point in the days leading up to the murder along the lines of, I wonder if it's going to happen tonight or something along those lines?
Yes, sir.
After Mr. Cataneo was killed, did you have conversations with Ms. Tobie about how, if at all, the money was going to be gotten to Mr. Cooper?
Yes, sir.
And explain what the conversations were with you and Ms. Tobie in that regard.
Basically, it was how are we going to get this money to him? At that point, I didn't even know that there was any way of contacting him.
But was that something discussed with you and Ms. Tobie about how it's going to be done, or how once you got the money, how that would take place?
Yes, sir.
And was anything, to your knowledge, firmed up in that regard?
No, sir.
Did you have any discussion about, well, I wonder if we'll just drop the money, leave it somewhere, or were things thrown out like that? I wonder if we'll
Yes,
do it.
sir. Yes.
And was that both you and Ms. Tobie talking to each other?
Yes, sir.
And just to make clear, when those conversations were taking place, did Ms. Tobie indicate to you that she was expecting to obtain the $500,000 insurance policy?
Yes, sir.
Just one moment, Your Honor, I just want to look through. Just wanted to cover, you mentioned specifically a couple conversations that you overheard about the timing of this with Mr. Cooper. You mentioned one at the shop, sooner versus later, it's got to be done by the 1st, and also the one at the house.
Yes, sir.
Did you drive by the shop with Tobie other times during that time to kind of find out what's going on, if it's going to happen, things like that?
Yes, sir.
And how did those conversations, was it like the firearm conversations about, when are you going to do it, things like that?
Yes, sir.
And were there extended conversations?
No.
In your mind, was it understood that did you know what was being referred to, the killing Mr. Cataneo?
Yes, sir.
And as in your mind, was the trip to Georgia a deadline, more or less?
Yes, sir.
For it to occur?
Yes, sir.
Did the specific, more extended conversation that you referenced, did that occur closer in time to when the so-called deadline was coming up?
Yes,
in
sir.
time?
Yes, sir.
Again, Your Honor, I'm just going to go over something real quick here. What I'm going to ask you, Ms. Blake, do you know, and I'm not talking about what you may have heard later, but did you know from conversations with Ms. Tobie about any meetings that she may have had with Mr. Cooper when you weren't present?
No.
Okay. So you have received information or heard about things after the fact, but nothing that you know about directly, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And were you aware of anybody else that, first of all, that Ms. Tobie was soliciting to kill her husband other than Mr. Cooper during this time? And were you soliciting anybody else other than what you've talked about with regard to Mr. Cooper?
No, sir.
And after the murder occurred, were you discussing with Ms. Tobie about getting money to Mr. Cooper?
Yes,
To
sir.
Tysjohaun?
Yes, sir.
Was there any discussion with her about getting money to anybody else other than Tysjohaun?
No, sir.
Thank you, that's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
May I cross, Your Honor, from here?
This is my proffer, Your Honor.
I don't, is there a purpose to the cross? Because we don't, something that would have to do with the admissibility of this? That's why we're doing this.
I think so.
Okay?
And the reason would be to test the reliability of this witness's testimony. I think that's core fundamental basis.
No, not on proffer, Your Honor. That's a jury question, the witness's credibility. This is my proffer. This is the evidence I tend to introduce in direct examination with regard to the conspiracy. Now, if the defense wants to cross-examine after that's done, that's fine in front of the jury, but this is whether the state has evidence.
As we're all aware, you have admissibility and you have weight. What we're talking about in this proffer is only admissibility. Now, do you have something in way of a cross-examination? And again, I'm not privy to your to your knowledge or to your cross, certainly. But do you have something that actually goes to admissibility?
In this regard, it's our position that the admissibility evidence hinges upon the reliability of this witness's testimony. And that in order to evaluate the reliability and whether or not there is substantial reliable evidence of a conspiracy, then the court has to evaluate the credibility of this witness.
All right, I'm going to allow the cross-examination, but I'm going to limit it in terms of factors that would go not to the weight, but to the actual admissibility, because that's what we're talking about.
I'm going to try to go right down what Mr. Davis just did.
Okay.
And may I be seated, because this is a cumbersome book. And probably tip that podium over.
Yes.
Thank you.
And again, Mr. Mott, I don't want to cut you off here, but I'm limiting this strictly to admissibility.
Just briefly, Ms. Blake, you made a statement on 6/30, that would be June the 30th, 2004, to the police down at the homicide investigation unit, correct?
Yes, sir.
And just to summarize that, you were not truthful with them at that time, correct?
Yes, sir.
So just to save time, and I maybe should have done this earlier, instead of going through her prior statements, we'll stipulate that Ms. Blake came in on October the 6th and gave a statement about her involvement. She made numerous statements prior to that time denying her involvement, lying to the police, not coming forward. So there's no...
You said that on opening statement.
Yes, sir. Well, and anyway, we'll stipulate, and I didn't ask Ms. Blake that, but up until that point, she was denying, in essence, knowing anything. So maybe just save time and avoid going through all her prior statements.
Go ahead, Mr. Mott.
True, Ms. Blake, that both you and Ms. Tobie were looking for a gun?
No, sir.
Now, you've had the opportunity to review your statements.
Yes, sir, I have.
In the October the 6th, Part A statement on page 3, line 11, you state, that was when Karen and I both started asking around about a gun. That was
Yes,
in
sir.
February?
Yes, sir.
So you said that, didn't you?
I said that, but I never once got out of the vehicle and asked any single person for a gun. I said that in the context that I drove her wherever she had to go.
And in your October the 6th statement, you also told the police that Karen had talked to Todd and told him that it had to be done before July the 4th.
Yes, sir.
And that you were not present. Did you tell the police that you weren't present?
Yes, sir.
But now you're telling the judge that you were present.
The second time I was present.
So on page 7, line 14 of your October the 6th first statement, when you responded as follows, who had the conversation with Tysjohaun, and you say, Karen did.
Yes, sir.
That's contrary to what you just told the court, that you were present in that conversation. Isn't that
I
correct?
was present. I did not have a conversation, but I was present during the conversation.
Can you put a time on any of these meetings that you're talking about?
Not really. It's very confusing.
The best you can do is between February and June?
That's basically it. I really can't pin it down.
You can't say what conversations were in March, or what were in April, what were in May?
No, not specifically.
Can you tell us what month the meeting was at the mall?
I believe it was in May.
And what's the basis of that knowledge? Is that your independent recollection or what you've read in
No,
the police
sir.
reports?
But I read in the police report.
And on page 9, line 4, you indicate that Ty didn't give you a price in kind in regard to a gun.
Yes, sir.
Does that not mean that you had conversations with Ty about how much you were going to pay for a gun?
No, because I didn't ask him.
Why would you expect him to give you a price if you didn't ask him?
When I said give me a price, I was talking as with Karen. We were every time that we spoke with Tysjohaun, we were together.
Every time that you
Well,
spoke?
I was every time Karen was in the vehicle, I was with her, and every time that we spoke to Tysjohaun, we were in the vehicle. I drove her everywhere she went.
You just told us that there was a conversation at the duplex. You weren't in the car then, right?
No, I wasn't.
And you just told us about some conversation in the shop when you saw Ty make a gang sign that you were in the office.
Right, yes, sir.
You weren't in the car then?
No, sir. But I was with Karen the whole time, every one of those times. I was never alone with Tysjohaun.
Your Honor, I'm going to renew my objections. I don't see this, if this witness is testifying as to proffer, I fail to see how this could go on for hours and it wouldn't rise to the level where you're going to say, I'm not admitting your testimony at all.
Okay, again, I have heard nothing so far, Mr. Mott, that would go to anything but the weight of the testimony with the jury,
Let me cut
not to
the chase. Let
admissibility.
me cut to the chase. On this incident about sooner or better, or sooner or later, isn't it a fact that the sooner or later testimony you're telling this judge in this courtroom under oath is not your testimony, but what you thought was the right thing to say after the police talked to you for about 45 minutes?
No, sir.
Isn't it a fact, ma'am, that the first thing you said is there was no exchange, that I said nothing in regard to that particular conversation?
No, sir.
And then you said, well, maybe I said sooner or later.
No, sir. I did say sooner or later.
That's what you
Sooner the
eventually
better.
said. That's eventually what
No.
you said after
No.
about 5 or 10 minutes.
No, sir.
That's not true?
No, sir.
I can show you exactly
There were two incidents.
Now, I think that goes right to the heart of her credibility, Your Honor, in terms of the admissibility of this evidence. Not a jury question, but a legal question.
I understand your distinction.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, the defense, what they're doing now, they're attempting to get a second deposition in from this witness. None of this goes to admissibility. It's clearly weight, and they're trying to get, again, they're just trying to redepose her, and we object.
I don't know what they're trying to do, but I do know that what I've heard does not constitute any admissibility questions as to admissibility parameters, and I'm inclined to stop the cross-examination. Do you have something that actually goes to admissibility? Other than this weight, I mean, what you raised goes to credibility, goes to weight, as with any witness. No?
Pardon me?
I say, do you have anything else that actually goes to
This witness has
credibility?
made so many different statements that it goes right to the foundation of her competence. That's how bad it is. Not only her reliability, but her actual competence. Matter of fact, I'm going to move right now that we have her examined. I think she might be insane.
Judge, this is an abuse of this process. It really is. We've done a proffer, Your Honor, and this is clearly far afield. This is grandstanding. It's an abuse of the process, and we'd object to this.
The objection is sustained. The motion for an examination is denied.
I have a good faith basis to believe that this witness is incompetent.
Okay.
And I'm not a psychiatrist, so I'm asking that she be examined
Okay.
to determine her competency to even testify.
That is denied.
And let me just say for the record, one of the reasons that I'm asking for that is that last week we took her deposition, and she's had many times, half a dozen times, to tell the police or us in depositions about the details of how Karen Tobie was supposed to kill John Cataneo. We heard at first there was no plan whatsoever. Then there was some amorphous plan. Now, the last time we talked to her last week, she goes into great detail, and she says that Miss Tobie was going to dress up in a black ninja outfit and wear a blonde wig and hide in the bushes and jump out in the early morning hours when John returns home and shoot. That was all new to us. And she's had more than a half a dozen or a dozen opportunities to say that before. She never did. And that's an example of the reason why I think she's incompetent.
All right. Your observations are noted for the record.
Thank you.
Is there anything further?
Not from the state.
No, sir.
Okay. Then this witness can be taken back. All right, is there anything further before we break for the evening?
No, sir, other than I would just reemphasize, there's plenty from her testimony, but I'd emphasize again the other evidence we talked about in the hearing, such as the ballistics match of the casing of Mr. Cooper, the shell casing in his backyard to the one found at the scene, the testimony of Samantha Alexander and Marissa Whipper about Mr. Cooper's behavior. I think all that is just corroboration of the evidence of a conspiracy. So I don't want to rehash all that. We've already done it once, but I would ask the court to consider that in addition.
All right, it's my inclination, and I'm taking extensive notes here, but I didn't hear, it seemed like I might have heard one thing that came outside the parameter of what would be admissible under 90.803.18 just as a plain admission, because these were direct statements that were made by each defendant in the presence of, allegedly, in the presence of Ms. Blake. That being the case, they would be admissible, each one of them, in just under the admission exception to the hearsay rule. Now, it seemed like there was one small piece that did not come as a direct admission. That would have to depend upon 18E, that being statements of co-conspirators about the conspiracy. But I think all the rest of it's admissible just as an admission, and that's going to be the ruling. So.
Your Honor, just the one thing, I think the one that I can call right now would be the statements after the fact about getting the money to Mr. Cooper.
Yes, you're right. That's it.
There are cases that talk about a conspiracy and a payment and a murder for hire be continuing until the payment's made after the murder. So So we would just.
I'm familiar with
argue
those.
that would fall within that parameter. That would be a co-conspirator statement, but
If the rest of the testimony comes in as proffered, that would, in all likelihood, I'll accept argument on that, of course, if anybody wants to show me cases or whatever. But my position would be that the admissions that are admissible under 803.18 would serve to establish the existence of a conspiracy and therefore make admissible under 18E the reference to Ms. Cooper after the killing with regard to payment, because that is in furtherance of the ultimate last acts of the conspiracy. So that would be the ruling of the court. But again, if you got cases, you want to take a look at something tonight, I'm always glad to listen to the
Judge, it's our position that we understand that if the court's ruling or finding is that most of the testimony presented by Ms. Blake regarding conversations that were had between Mr. Cooper and Ms. Tobie were admissions, then we agree that it does not involve the co-conspirator exception to the hearsay rule. My view of the testimony was that, in fact, most of it was co-conspirator statements, that it was not, they were not admissions, and that the court should not allow the statements as co-conspirators exception to the hearsay rule because the conspiracy has not been established by substantial independent evidence. I think what Mr. Davis was doing with Ms. Blake was he was establishing a conspiracy with the hearsay statements. And if the court would look at Foster v. State 679, Southern 2nd 747, Christie v. State 652 932, and Romani v. State at 542, Southern 2nd 984, we think that supports our position.
Thank you very much, and I will take a look at those three cases. Okay. Is there anything else before we close for the evening?
not the mistake.
All right, if there is anything to be taken up beforehand, let's get together yourselves as soon as you can before 9 o'clock so that we can take care of it, if everybody's going to be here. Other than that, we will be in recess until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.